I'm Ruby Edwards, and 3 months ago I thought I had it all figured out. Married to Harvey Reid for 8 years, a successful city planning career, and a beautiful house in Montgomery's historic district. Then I found her panties in my husband's glove compartment. Not mine, definitely not mine. The divorce papers felt like sandpaper between my fingers, as Judge Martinez made it official. Harvey got half of everything, including my grandmother's china and the vacation home we built together. I got my bruised pride and a checking account that made me wince every time I looked at it. You sure about this, Ruby? My lawyer shuffled his papers. He's willing to work things out. I'm sure. The words came out steadier than I felt. Harvey sat across the courtroom with his new girlfriend, a blonde 20-something who probably didn't even know what a mortgage was. Now I throw myself into work like a woman possessed. The downtown Montgomery revitalization project has become my obsession. 16-hour days designing pedestrian walkways and green spaces. Anything to avoid going home to that damn empty apartment that still smells like his cologne. My assistant knocked on my office door around 9 p.m. Ruby, you should head home. The janitor's already been through twice. Just finishing up these traffic flow diagrams. I rubbed my eyes. The computer screen blurred. Everything blurred these days. The October rain hammered my windshield as I finally left the office. Montgomery's streets were slick and black, reflecting neon signs from late-night diners and gas stations. I should have paid attention to that weird grinding noise my car had been making all week. The engine died right there on Riverside Drive, near the old cotton mill ruins. No streetlights, no other cars, just me and the sound of rain on metal. I tried turning the key. Nothing. Tried again. The engine made a sad clicking sound like it was giving up on life, which pretty much matched my mood. My phone showed 1 bar of signal. Perfect. I called AAA and got a recorded message about high call volume. The rain got harder. That's when I saw headlights cutting through the darkness. A pickup truck slowed down, and I thought about all those horror movies where the stranded woman makes the worst possible decision. But desperate times, right? The truck pulled over. A woman got out, blonde hair tucked under a baseball cap, wearing jeans and work boots like she actually knew how to use them. She jogged over to my window. "Car trouble?" she called through the glass. I rolled down the window. "Engine won't start. I think it might be the battery." "I'm Cora. Let me grab my jumper cables." She smiled, and something about it made the whole terrible day feel less terrible. 10 minutes later, my car was running again. Cora refused to let me pay her, but I convinced her to meet me at Murphy's Diner for coffee. It seemed like the least I could do. We sat in a corner booth under flickering fluorescent lights. Cora ordered pie with her coffee, apple with vanilla ice cream, and somehow made it look sophisticated. "So what do you do when you're not rescuing strangers?" I asked. "Community organizing. Neighborhood gardens, after-school programs, fighting City Hall when they try to bulldoze something important." She laughed. "Probably sounds boring compared to most people's jobs." "I work for City Hall. I'm the one doing the bulldozing." Her eyes widened. "Ruby Edwards, the downtown project. Guilty as charged." I expected her to start lecturing me about gentrification and displaced residents. Instead, she leaned forward. "I've read your proposals. The green corridor design is brilliant." We talked until the diner started stacking chairs on tables, about urban planning and community needs and how to balance progress with preservation. She had opinions, strong ones, but she listened too, really listened. Walking back to our cars, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, like maybe I wasn't completely broken after all. 2 weeks later, Cora Henderson walked into my life again, this time through the glass doors of City Hall. She wore a sundress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine, but her expression was all business. I was presenting the downtown project to the Planning Commission, and there she was in the front row with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "The proposed development will displace 3 community gardens that serve over 200 families," she said when public comment opened. Her voice carried across the room like she'd been born to speak to crowds. "These aren't just empty lots. They're food sources for people who can't afford grocery store prices." I felt my jaw clench. We'd done environmental impact studies, traffic assessments, economic projections, but somehow I'd missed the human element sitting right in front of me. Commissioner Walsh looked bored. "Miss Henderson, progress requires difficult choices. Progress shouldn't mean choosing between feeding families and building another Starbucks." She had a point, damn her. After the meeting, I found her in the parking lot, leaning against that same pickup truck that had rescued me. "You could have mentioned the gardens when we had coffee," I said. "Would it have mattered?" She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "Maybe." "Then let's find out." She smiled that same smile from the diner. "Drinks tonight?" "Murphy's Tavern, 7 o'clock. Murphy's Tavern was the kind of place where city planners and community activists definitely didn't hang out together. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and a jukebox that only played songs from before I was born. Cora was already there when I arrived, nursing a beer and looking completely at ease. "I didn't peg you for a dive bar kind of person," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. "There's a lot you don't know about me yet." She signaled the bartender for another round, like how I've been fighting losing battles in this city for 10 years. 10 years is a long time to keep losing. Someone has to care about the people nobody else sees. She took a long drink. "Your project's not evil, Ruby, but it's incomplete." We talked for 3 hours, about her community gardens and my traffic patterns, about gentrification and growth and finding balance in a city that seemed determined to choose sides. She had this way of listening that made me want to tell her everything, including things I'd never said out loud. "What happened to your marriage?" she asked during a lull in conversation. "He found someone younger, more exciting, less obsessed with zoning ordinances." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Turns out 8 years doesn't count for much when a blonde with perfect skin shows up." "His loss." Something in her tone made me look up. She was watching me with an intensity that made my stomach flip in ways I didn't want to analyze. "We should go," I said quickly. "It's getting late." She walked me to my car, even though hers was parked in the opposite direction. The October air was crisp, full of the smell of dying leaves and wood smoke from someone's fireplace. "I want to show you something," she said. "The gardens. Tomorrow morning if you have time." "Cora, I can't just redesign the entire project because—" "I'm not asking you to redesign anything. I'm asking you to see what you're replacing before you replace it." The community gardens were nothing like what I'd imagined. 3 lots between rundown houses, transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Raised beds overflowing with late-season vegetables, fruit trees heavy with apples and pears, a greenhouse made from salvaged windows that caught the morning sunlight like stained glass. "Mrs. Garcia grows enough tomatoes here to can for the whole winter," Cora explained, leading me down a gravel path between the beds. "The Johnson kids come here after school because their mom works double shifts. Mr. Thompson teaches anyone who'll listen about companion planting." An elderly black man looked up from where he was harvesting collard greens. "Morning, Cora. This the city planner you've been talking about?" "Ruby Edwards. Meet Franklin Thompson. He's been gardening longer than both of us have been breathing." Mr. Thompson wiped his hands on a towel and shook mine. "Heard you want to build something fancy where we grow our food? The development would bring jobs, tax revenue, investment in the neighborhood." "Investment for who?" His eyes were kind but sharp. "My granddaughter can't afford to live here if property taxes double." We spent an hour walking through the gardens, meeting people whose names I should have known before I started drawing lines on maps, seeing connections I'd missed in all my careful planning. Standing under an apple tree heavy with fruit, surrounded by the smell of earth and growing things, I felt something shift inside me. Not just about the project, but about the woman who'd brought me here. Cora was kneeling next to a bed of chrysanthemums, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, completely absorbed in deadheading flowers. She looked up and caught me staring. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just thinking." But it wasn't nothing. It was the realization that Harvey had never looked at me the way I was looking at Cora Henderson, like she was something worth paying attention to. The next city council meeting felt like a battlefield. I'd spent 2 weeks revising the downtown project, trying to incorporate Cora's suggestions without completely derailing 3 years of work. The compromise I'd reached looked good on paper. In person, it was about to get messy. "The revised proposal reduces parking by 30%, Councilman Bradley announced, reading from his notes. "How exactly does that serve business owners?" I clicked to my next slide, showing foot traffic patterns and public transit connections. Studies show that walkable neighborhoods actually increase revenue per square foot when people can easily access. "Studies don't pay rent," interrupted Maria Santos, who owned a boutique on Commerce Street. "My customers drive here. They need places to park. From the back of the room, Cora stood up. She'd dressed professionally today, navy blazer and slacks, but her eyes blazed with the same passion I'd seen in the gardens. What about customers who can't afford cars? What about families who walk everywhere because they have to? Her voice carried over the murmur of the crowd. This isn't just about serving people with money to spend. Miss Henderson, Mayor Davidson said through gritted teeth, you're out of order. So is a city that only plans for half its residents. The room erupted. Business owners shouting about economic impact. Community advocates demanding affordable housing provisions. Me standing at the podium feeling like I'd started a war instead of presenting a development plan. Enough. Mayor Davidson banged his gavel. We'll table this for further review. Next item. I packed my laptop with shaking hands. 3 years of work, reduced to a shouting match between people who'd never find common ground. Outside the council chambers, Cora caught up with me in the hallway. Ruby, wait. That was a disaster. I kept walking toward the exit. You turned a planning discussion into a damn revolution. Sometimes that's what it takes. She matched my pace, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Change isn't supposed to be comfortable. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who has to make this actually work. We pushed through the heavy doors into the evening air. October had turned cold, and I could see my breath in small puffs of frustration. You're right, Cora said quietly. I make it harder for you. I know that. Something in her voice made me stop walking. She looked exhausted, like she'd been fighting battles longer than she could remember. Look, I'm sorry, I said. It's not your fault the system is broken. Let me buy you a drink, as an apology for making your life complicated. We walked to Murphy's Tavern in silence, the tension from the meeting still crackling between us. The bar was nearly empty, just a few regulars watching baseball on the ancient television above the bar. What I don't understand, I said after we'd ordered, is why you care so much about this particular project. There are plenty of other fights in this city. Cora traced patterns on the wooden table with her finger. I grew up in those neighborhoods. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep us in that little house on Maple Street. If these gardens had existed when I was 12, maybe we wouldn't have lived on ramen and government cheese. I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know about me. She looked up, and her blue eyes held something I couldn't quite read. Like how I never expected to care what a city planner thought about anything. But you do care? More than I should. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I found myself studying her face, the way her blonde hair fell across her forehead, the small scar above her left eyebrow that I'd never noticed before. We should walk, she said suddenly. I need air. The community garden looked different at night. Mysterious, romantic even, though I pushed that thought away as soon as it formed. Cora had a key to the gate, and we wandered the paths between raised beds, our footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. The chrysanthemums bloom until the first frost, she said, stopping beside a bed of flowers that glowed white in the moonlight. Mrs. Chen planted these varieties specifically because they last longer than everything else. They're beautiful. She says they represent resilience, things that survive when everything else gives up. I turned to look at her, standing there surrounded by flowers and moonlight, and something inside me broke open. Maybe it was the stress from the meeting. Maybe it was months of loneliness since the divorce. Maybe it was just the way she looked at me like I mattered. Cora, I said, but the words died in my throat. She stepped closer. What? Instead of answering, I kissed her. Soft at first, tentative, like I was asking a question. She kissed me back, her hand coming up to touch my face, and the question became an answer that scared the hell out of me. We stood there among the chrysanthemums, holding each other like we were the last 2 people in the world. Her lips tasted like wine and possibility. Her hands were warm against my skin. Everything I thought I knew about myself shifted sideways. Then reality crashed back. I pulled away, breathing hard. I can't. I don't. Ruby? I have to go. I ran. Actually ran through the garden gate and down the street to my car like a coward. Left her standing there in the moonlight, probably wondering what the hell had just happened. The truth was, I didn't know either. But driving home through Montgomery's empty streets, I couldn't stop touching my lips where she'd kissed me. Couldn't stop thinking about how right it had felt, and how terrifying that was. For 3 weeks, I avoided Cora Henderson like she carried the plague. I took different routes to work, ate lunch at my desk instead of going to Murphy's Diner, and pretended I didn't see her pickup truck parked outside City Hall on Tuesday mornings. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was her while simultaneously praying it wasn't. The kiss replayed in my mind like a broken record. The way she'd felt against me, warm and solid and completely right. The way I'd panicked and run like a scared teenager. The way I kept touching my lips, remembering. I buried myself in work, redesigning traffic patterns until my eyes burned. The downtown project had been shelved indefinitely after the council meeting disaster, leaving me with time to obsess over every detail of what happened that night in the garden. My assistant knocked on my door around noon on a Friday. "Ruby, there's someone here to see you." Before I could ask who, Cora walked in carrying a brown paper bag and wearing the kind of smile that suggested she wasn't taking no for an answer. "I brought lunch," she said, setting the bag on my desk like it was perfectly normal for her to show up after 3 weeks of radio silence. "Soup from that place on Dexter Avenue you mentioned liking." "Cora, I can't." "Just soup, Ruby. Not a marriage proposal." She sat down across from my desk and started unpacking containers. Chicken and dumplings that smelled like my grandmother's kitchen. Fresh bread still warm from the bakery. Apple cider that steamed when she poured it into paper cups. "You've been avoiding me," she said without looking up. "I've been busy." "Bullshit." She handed me a spoon. "I scared you." I took a sip of soup and tried to figure out how to explain feelings I didn't understand myself. "It's not that simple." "It never is." Cora leaned back in her chair, studying me with those blue eyes that seemed to see straight through everything I tried to hide. "You want to know what I think? Do I have a choice? I think you've spent so long being what everyone else expected that you forgot to figure out what you actually want." "That's not fair, isn't it?" She broke off a piece of bread and offered it to me. "When's the last time you did something just because it felt right, not because it was safe or practical or what you were supposed to do?" The bread tasted like butter and possibility. Like maybe she had a point I wasn't ready to admit. "I was married for 8 years, I said quietly. I thought I had everything figured out. The house, the husband, the 5-year plan. Then I found out Harvey was sleeping with his secretary, and suddenly none of it mattered. So now you get to figure out what does matter." "What if I'm not ready for that?" Cora reached across the desk and touched my hand. Her fingers were warm, calloused from garden work, completely different from Harvey's soft lawyer hands. "I'm not asking you to figure out your whole life, Ruby. I'm asking you to have dinner with me. Tonight. My apartment. Just the two of us and no pressure." I should have said no. Should have made up some excuse about work or prior commitments or needing to wash my hair. Instead, I heard myself saying yes. Her apartment was nothing like I'd expected. I'd imagined something cluttered and bohemian, full of protest posters and rescued furniture. Instead, it was clean and bright, with hardwood floors and plants that actually looked healthy. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with everything from urban planning textbooks to poetry collections. "Wine?" she asked, already opening a bottle of red. "Please." We sat on her couch, closer than we'd been since that night in the garden. She'd changed into jeans and a soft sweater that made her look approachable instead of like the fierce community activist who'd stared down the city council. "Tell me about your marriage," she said. "What was good about it?" "You want to hear about Harvey?" "I want to understand you." So I told her. About meeting Harvey in law school, about how safe he'd made me feel, about building a life that looked perfect from the outside, about the gradual drift apart, the growing sense that I was playing a role instead of living a life. "And the sex?" she asked quietly. I nearly choked on my wine. "What about it? Was it good?" "It was adequate." Adequate. She set down her wine glass and moved closer. "Ruby, life's too short for adequate." When she kissed me this time, I didn't run. I kissed her back with 8 years of repressed longing, with the desperate hunger of someone who'd been starving without realizing it. Her hands tangled in my hair, and I pulled her closer, needing to feel her warmth against me. "Are you sure?" she whispered against my lips. Instead of answering, I stood up and took her hand, leading her toward the bedroom. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure she could hear it, but I couldn't stop. Her bedroom was simple. White walls, a wooden bed, gauze curtains that filtered the evening light into something soft and golden. She turned to face me, and I saw my own nervousness reflected in her eyes. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "Neither do I." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "We'll figure it out together." She kissed me again, slower this time, like we had all the time in the world. Her hands found the buttons of my blouse while I explored the soft skin at the base of her throat. When she touched me, really touched me, I understood for the first time what I'd been missing. This wasn't just physical, it was recognition. Like finding a part of myself I'd lost years ago. Afterward, we lay tangled in her sheets, my head on her shoulder, listening to her heartbeat slow back to normal. "No regrets?" she asked, running her fingers through my hair. "Ask me tomorrow." But I already knew the answer. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like myself again. 3 months into whatever we were calling our relationship, I discovered Cora Henderson was a terrible keeper of secrets. Not about us, thank goodness. She respected my need to keep things quiet while I figured out how to be someone's girlfriend again. But about everything else? The woman was an open book written in permanent marker. "My back's been acting up," she mentioned casually over breakfast, buttering toast like she wasn't talking about something that had been keeping her awake at night. "Since when?" "Few months, no big deal." She took a bite, avoiding my eyes. "Probably just too much time bent over garden beds." But I'd seen her wince when she thought I wasn't looking. Seen her press her hand against her lower back when getting out of bed. Heard her moving around the apartment at 3 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. The truth came out 2 weeks later when I found her crying at her kitchen table, surrounded by medical bills that looked like they'd been multiplying when nobody was watching. "Cora, damn it, why didn't you tell me?" "Because there's nothing to tell." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I need surgery. I can't afford surgery. End of story." The bills painted a clearer picture. Herniated discs, nerve compression, a procedure that would cost more than she made in 6 months of community organizing. Her insurance, if you could call the bare-bones catastrophic plan insurance, covered exactly nothing useful. "How long have you been dealing with this?" "Since before I met you. It's getting worse, but..." She gestured at the papers scattered across the table. $28,000 might as well be $2 million. I wanted to write her a check. Wanted to solve this the way I solved zoning disputes and traffic problems. But even with my divorce settlement, that kind of money would clean out my savings, and Cora's pride was legendary in Montgomery activist circles. What if we found another way to raise the money? Like what? A bake sale? That's when she told me about her ridiculous plan to become an influencer. Cora Henderson, who barely knew how to use Instagram, was going to transform herself into some kind of lifestyle guru to pay for back surgery. "Social media pays real money if you can build a following," she explained, showing me articles she'd printed about successful content creators, fitness, lifestyle, community advocacy. "I can do that." "You hate having your picture taken." "I hate being broke and in pain more." She'd already bought cheap equipment. A ring light that made her look like she was being interrogated. A tripod that wouldn't stay steady. A microphone that picked up every sound in the building, including Mrs. Patterson's television next door. Her first videos were disasters. Awkward attempts at morning routines featuring granola that looked like gravel and yoga poses that made her back pain obvious to anyone paying attention. But something about her authenticity, her complete inability to fake enthusiasm for products she didn't actually use, started attracting viewers. "Look at this," she said, shoving her phone under my nose. 2,000 followers in 3 weeks. The comments were mostly positive, people responding to her honest approach to healthy living. Community advocates from other cities asking for advice. A few creepy guys who got blocked immediately, but mostly genuine engagement from women who appreciated content that wasn't filtered and fake. "Maybe this could actually work," I said, scrolling through responses to her latest video about container gardening. "Don't sound so surprised." But I was surprised when her following exploded overnight. A video she'd made about growing vegetables in small spaces got shared by some larger account, and suddenly she had 10,000 followers watching her stumble through morning workouts and community garden tours. The money started coming in slowly. Sponsored posts for organic food companies, affiliate links for gardening supplies, little amounts that added up to something that might eventually matter. Then Antonio Reed started commenting on everything she posted. At first, his messages seemed harmless. Compliments on her latest video. Questions about community organizing. Support for her advocacy work. But they got longer and more personal, peppered with heart emojis and increasingly romantic undertones. "This guy's getting weird," I said, reading over her shoulder as she responded to comments one evening. "Look at this message." Antonio had written 3 paragraphs about how her smile brightened his day and how he wished he could meet someone like her in real life. He'd started sending gifts too. A fancy yoga mat, organic coffee beans, a necklace that was definitely not appropriate for someone she'd never met. "He's harmless," Cora said, but I could hear uncertainty in her voice. "Just lonely, probably." Lonely guys on the internet are exactly the ones you should worry about. But Antonio Reed wasn't just any lonely guy on the internet. His profile showed a successful businessman from Birmingham, good-looking in that generic way that suggested professional headshots. His comments were articulate, supportive of her causes, never crossing obvious lines into creepy territory. Still, something about him bothered me. Maybe it was the way he seemed to know details about her life that she'd only mentioned in passing. Maybe it was how quickly he responded to every post, like he was sitting there waiting. Or maybe it was just jealousy rearing its ugly head, reminding me that my girlfriend was beautiful and inspiring and visible to thousands of people online. "The surgery's scheduled for next month," Cora announced over dinner, waving her phone triumphantly. "I've got enough saved up, plus donations from followers who want to help." Donations? People started a fundraiser after I mentioned the surgery. Antonio contributed $500. She showed me the GoFundMe page, which had raised nearly $8,000 from strangers who cared about her recovery. I should have been happy, relieved. Instead, I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. Something about Antonio Reed's generosity felt too convenient, too invested for someone who'd never met her in person. But Cora was glowing with hope for the first time in months, and I didn't have the heart to voice my concerns. "That's amazing," I said, and mostly meant it. 3 weeks before the surgery, Cora's YouTube channel exploded. A video about urban farming that had been steadily gaining views suddenly went viral overnight. 20,000 views turned into 200,000. Her subscriber count jumped from 15,000 to over 60,000 in a matter of days. "I don't understand what happened," she said, staring at her laptop screen like it might bite her. "It's the same video I posted last week. Sometimes the algorithm just picks something up," I said, though I knew about as much about social media as she did. "Your message resonated." Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications, comments, new followers, collaboration requests from brands I'd actually heard of. The community garden video had struck some kind of nerve with people hungry for authentic content about sustainable living. Antonio Reed was among the first to congratulate her on the viral success, his comment pinned at the top of the video by sheer volume of engagement. "So proud of you, Cora. Your message is changing lives, including mine." "He's been really supportive," she said, clicking through his profile. "Look at all the community work he does in Birmingham." His profile was impressive. Photos of him at charity events, volunteering at food banks, speaking at environmental conferences. Either he was genuinely as altruistic as he appeared, or he was very good at curating his image. The surge in followers brought new challenges. Brands reaching out daily with sponsorship offers, media requests for interviews about urban farming and community activism, a literary agent who wanted to discuss book deals about grassroots organizing. "This is insane," Cora said, overwhelmed by emails flooding her inbox. 6 months ago, I had 300 followers who were mostly my neighbors. It's what you wanted, right? Platform for your message? And money for the surgery, which is no longer a problem. She showed me her latest earnings report. Between sponsorships, affiliate commissions, and direct donations, she'd raised more than enough for the procedure plus a comfortable buffer. Antonio's contributions had increased alongside her fame. Not just money, but expensive gifts that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Professional camera equipment, a top-of-the-line laptop, flowers delivered to her apartment with cards that walked right up to the line of inappropriate, without quite crossing it. "You should be careful with him," I said, watching her unpack another delivery. "This is getting weird." "He's just generous." But she looked troubled too. Although his messages are getting more personal, she showed me his latest private message. 3 paragraphs about how her strength inspired him, how he'd been going through a difficult divorce and her content had helped him find purpose again. He mentioned details about his life that felt calculated to create emotional connection. His ex-wife who didn't understand his philanthropy. his loneliness in a big house in Birmingham's most expensive neighborhood, his dream of finding someone who shared his values. Cora, this guy's falling in love with you through a screen. That's ridiculous. Is it? Look at this. I pointed to a line where he'd written about how he felt like they were meant to meet. He's building a fantasy relationship with someone he's never actually met. The livestream disaster happened the next week. Cora was demonstrating container gardening techniques when her camera malfunctioned, cutting out the video while the audio continued. She was trying to fix the equipment when I walked into the background, wearing one of her t-shirts and clearly having just woken up from a nap on her couch. Damn thing never works right, she muttered, not realizing thousands of people could still hear her while seeing a frozen frame of her looking frustrated. Need help? I asked, leaning over her shoulder to look at the camera. That's when the video came back online. Me, obviously comfortable in her space, obviously more than just a friend helping with technical difficulties. The chat exploded with questions and speculation. Who is that? Cora has a girlfriend? Are you dating someone? Tell us about your relationship. Cora looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Her face went through several emotions before settling on something that looked like determination. Everyone, this is Ruby, she said, pulling me into frame. She's been helping me with the gardening videos. And she's my girlfriend. The chat went wild. Supportive comments mixed with surprised reactions and a few ugly ones that she quickly deleted. But mostly, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People appreciated her honesty, her willingness to be vulnerable about her personal life. We didn't plan to come out like this, she continued, her arm around my waist feeling warm and steady. But I'm not ashamed of who I love. Ruby's amazing, and I'm lucky to have her in my life. I kissed her cheek, and the chat filled with heart emojis and congratulations. For the first time since we'd started whatever this was, I felt completely comfortable being seen with her. No more hiding, no more pretending we were just friends working on urban planning projects. The aftermath was mostly positive. Her followers seemed to genuinely support the relationship, with many sharing their own coming-out stories and celebrating her authenticity. Brands didn't pull their sponsorships. The media requests actually increased, with several LGBTQ publications wanting to feature her story. But Antonio Reed's response was different. His congratulations comment was brief and formal, lacking the enthusiasm of his usual messages. His private message that evening was longer and more troubling. I have to admit, I'm surprised by today's revelation. I thought we had a special connection, Cora. I've been planning to visit Montgomery to meet you in person. I hope we can still be friends despite this unexpected development. That's definitely not the response of someone who just saw you as an inspiration, I said after reading it. This guy thought he had a chance with you. But we've never even met. We've never had a conversation beyond comments and messages. That doesn't matter to people like him. He's built an entire relationship in his head. The next morning, Antonio Reed announced in the comments of her latest video that he would be visiting Montgomery the following week for business. He hoped to finally meet Cora in person. You're not meeting him, I said flatly. I can't just ignore him. He supported the channel, donated to the surgery fund. It would be rude. It would be dangerous. But I could see in her eyes that she felt obligated. Antonio had been there from the beginning, one of her first supporters when she had barely 1,000 followers. His financial contributions had made the surgery possible. In her mind, she owed him at least a conversation. One meeting, she said finally. Somewhere public. You can come with me. Damn right I'm coming with you. I had a feeling that meeting Antonio Reed in person was going to change everything, though I couldn't have predicted exactly how. Antonio Reed looked exactly like his profile pictures, which should have been reassuring but somehow made everything worse. Perfect smile, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He'd chosen the meeting location, a trendy coffee shop in downtown Montgomery, that felt too intimate for what was supposed to be a casual fan encounter. Cora had dressed carefully, professionally casual in a way that said she took the meeting seriously but wasn't trying to impress anyone. I sat beside her in the corner booth, making it clear I wasn't just along for moral support. Cora, you're even more beautiful in person, Antonio said, sliding into the seat across from us. His eyes barely acknowledged my presence. I've been following your journey for months. You're truly inspiring. Thank you. This is Ruby, my girlfriend. Yes, we've been introduced. His smile never faltered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. I have to say, I was surprised by that announcement on your live stream. Why surprised? I asked, keeping my voice level. Well, Cora never mentioned being in a relationship in any of her content. I thought we had developed a more personal connection through our conversations. Cora shifted uncomfortably. Antonio, I appreciate your support, but our interactions have always been professional. Follower and content creator. Have they? He leaned forward, his voice taking on an intensity that made my skin crawl. The hours of private messages, the late-night conversations about your dreams and struggles? That felt personal to me. Those were responses to comments, Cora said firmly. I try to engage with my community, but that doesn't mean... I've contributed over $2,000 to your surgery fund, Antonio interrupted. I've promoted your channel to my network. I've been there for you when you needed support. And I'm grateful. But that doesn't create any kind of obligation beyond thanking you. His mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. Entitlement. Anger. The kind of rage that came from men who believed kindness was transactional. I see. He straightened his tie, composing himself. I suppose I misunderstood the situation. When someone shares their life online, accepts gifts and support, it creates expectations. The only expectation should be good content, I said sharply. She doesn't owe you anything beyond that. And you are? Someone who cares about her well-being. Someone who recognizes manipulation when she sees it. The tension crackled between us like electricity before a storm. Other customers were starting to notice, conversations dropping to whispers as they sensed drama unfolding in the corner booth. I think we should go, Cora said, starting to stand. Wait. Antonio's voice carried the authority of someone used to getting his way. I didn't drive 3 hours just for a 10-minute conversation. Cora, I know this is awkward, but I have genuine feelings for you. Feelings that developed over months of meaningful connection. Connection you invented in your head, I shot back. Ruby, please, Cora said quietly. But I could see her weighing the situation, trying to manage a clearly unstable man without making things worse. I'm in love with you, Cora. Antonio's voice carried across the coffee shop, drawing stares from every table. I know that's complicated now with your situation. But love like this doesn't just disappear. Antonio, I'm flattered, but... Don't say you're flattered. His composure cracked completely. I've supported your dreams. I've been there when no one else cared about your little gardening videos. I believed in you before you had 10,000 followers. And I appreciated that. But I never promised you anything beyond content. You led me on. All those personal messages, sharing your struggles with the surgery, letting me help you build your platform. That meant something. The coffee shop had gone completely quiet. Everyone was watching our table like we were dinner theater they hadn't paid for. Cora's face was red with embarrassment and anger. I shared my struggles publicly, with everyone, she said, her voice rising. That's what content creators do. I never led you on or promised you anything personal. So this is how you treat people who care about you? You use them for money and support, then humiliate them when they develop feelings? That's when I'd had enough. I stood up, positioning myself between Antonio and Cora like a human shield. She didn't use you for anything. You decided to interpret basic social media engagement as romantic interest. You built a fantasy relationship with someone you'd never met, then showed up expecting her to play along. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. I'm her girlfriend. The real one, not the imaginary one you created in your head. Antonio's face twisted with rage and embarrassment. Fine. Be with your little Dyke girlfriend. See how long that lasts when the novelty wears off. The slur hung in the air like poison. Every conversation in the coffee shop stopped completely. Cora stood up slowly, her face pale but determined. Get out, she said quietly. What? Get out. Leave Montgomery. Don't contact me again through any platform or channel. You're blocked from everything as of right now. Cora, I'm sorry, I didn't mean... You meant every word. Now everyone here knows exactly what kind of person you are. I moved closer to her, close enough to take her hand, close enough to show anyone watching exactly where my loyalties lay. Then, because Antonio Reed needed to understand that his delusions had no power here, I kissed her, right there in front of everyone, claiming my girlfriend with the kind of kiss that left no room for misinterpretation. When we broke apart, Cora was smiling despite everything. The coffee shop erupted in scattered applause from customers who'd been watching the drama unfold. "I love you too," she whispered, loud enough for Antonio to hear. He left without another word, his face a mask of humiliation and fury. We stayed long enough to finish our coffee and pretend everything was normal, but I could see Cora shaking slightly from adrenaline and relief. "That went well," she said sarcastically as we walked to my car. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay." She stopped walking and turned to face me. "I'm proud of us. Proud of how we handled that. Proud of being your girlfriend in front of everyone. Even the part where I basically declared ownership of you like some caveman? Especially that part." She kissed me again, softer this time but no less certain. I've never had anyone fight for me like that. Loading our car, I felt something shift between us. The relationship that had started as secret meetings and careful privacy had become something public and proud. Something worth defending against entitled men who thought women owed them romance in exchange for financial support. "No more hiding," Cora said as we drove home through Montgomery's familiar streets. "No more hiding," I agreed. But I had a feeling Antonio Reed wasn't finished with us yet. Harvey showed up on a Tuesday morning like a bad check that keeps bouncing back into your life. I was having coffee with Cora in her kitchen, discussing surgery recovery plans, when my phone rang with a number I should have deleted months ago. "Ruby? It's Harvey. We need to talk." "No, we don't." I started to hang up, but his voice carried that particular urgency that meant he was about to complicate my life in spectacular fashion. "I'm outside your apartment, please. Just 5 minutes." Cora raised an eyebrow, reading my expression perfectly. "Your ex-husband?" "Unfortunately." Harvey looked exactly the same as he had in divorce court, which somehow made everything worse. Same expensive suit, same perfectly styled hair, same confident smile that used to make me feel safe, and now just made me tired. "Ruby, you look good. Different, but good." His eyes took in my casual clothes, my lack of jewelry, the general softness that had replaced the sharp edges I'd worn during our marriage. "What do you want, Harvey?" "To apologize, to explain, to ask for another chance." I almost laughed. "You're 8 months too late for apologies and about a year too late for explanations." "I know I screwed up. The affair was a mistake, the worst mistake of my life. Sarah meant nothing. You're the one I should have been fighting for." Sarah. I'd never known the secretary's name before. Somehow learning it now made the betrayal feel fresh and sharp again, like reopening a wound that had finally started to heal. "Harvey, I've moved on. You should too." "With her?" His voice took on an edge I recognized from arguments we'd had toward the end. "Ruby, come on. This lesbian thing is just rebellion. You're angry at me, at men in general, so you're experimenting. This lesbian thing has a name. Her name is Cora, and she's not an experiment. You were married to me for 8 years. Happily married. You can't just suddenly become gay because we went through a rough patch." The presumption in his voice, the casual dismissal of everything I'd discovered about myself, made my jaw clench. "Our rough patch was you sleeping with someone else for 6 months. That's not a rough patch, that's infidelity." "I know, and I'm sorry. But Ruby, be practical. What future do you have with her? No kids, no family support, no financial security. I'm offering you everything back. The house, the lifestyle, the respect that comes with being Mrs. Harvey Reed." Behind me, I heard Cora's apartment door open and close. She emerged onto the front porch, coffee mug in hand, taking in the scene with the kind of calm that suggested she was ready for whatever came next. "You must be Harvey," she said, extending her free hand. "I'm Cora Henderson." Harvey looked her up and down with poorly concealed disdain. "The community activist, among other things." Her smile was pleasant, and completely unimpressed by his attitude. "Ruby's told me so much about you. Nothing good, I'm sure. Actually, she rarely mentions you at all." The barb landed perfectly, Harvey's confident expression faltering for just a moment. "I'd like to speak to my wife privately." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "And anything you want to say, you can say in front of Cora." "Fine." Harvey's composure cracked, revealing the controlling man I'd somehow missed during 8 years of marriage. "This whole thing is ridiculous, Ruby. You're throwing away a perfectly good life for what? Some middle-aged crisis? An experiment with alternative lifestyles?" "I'm throwing away a life that was never mine to begin with," I said quietly. "A life where I played a role you wanted instead of being who I actually am." "And who are you?" Really? Some small-town lesbian activist living paycheck to paycheck? Cora stepped forward, and I could feel the tension radiating from her like heat. I think you should leave now. I'm not talking to you. But you are talking about me, and doing it badly. Ruby doesn't need your permission to be happy, and she sure as hell doesn't need your approval of her choices. Her choices? Harvey laughed, the sound bitter and cruel. You mean your manipulation. I've seen your social media. You're using her to build your little online brand. How long before you get bored and move on to the next donor? That's enough, I said. But Harvey was on a roll, 8 months of rejection and wounded pride pouring out in a toxic flood. She doesn't love you, Ruby. She loves what you represent. Financial stability, social media content, a way out of her paycheck-to-paycheck existence. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? When's the last time she paid for dinner? When's the last time she contributed anything to this relationship besides drama and surgery bills? The words hit their target perfectly. Every insecurity I'd tried to ignore, every moment of doubt about whether Cora could possibly want me for myself instead of what I provided, crystallized into sharp-edged fear. Harvey, stop. But my voice lacked conviction, and he heard it. Come home, Ruby. We can work through this. Premarital counseling, couples therapy, whatever you need. Just stop this experiment before you destroy your entire life for someone who's using you. I looked at Cora, standing there with her coffee mug and her morning clothes and her complete lack of defense against accusations that sounded so reasonable when stripped of context. She'd never denied that my divorce settlement helped with her surgery costs. Never pretended that dating someone with financial stability didn't make her life easier. Is that what this is? I asked quietly. Am I just convenient? Ruby, no. Cora set down her mug, reaching for me. You know that's not true. Do I? Harvey's right about one thing. I've paid for most of our dates, helped with your medical bills, supported your activism work. What exactly are you contributing to this relationship besides letting me feel needed? The hurt in her eyes was immediate and devastating, but Harvey's poison had already done its work. Every generous impulse, every moment of financial support, reframed as evidence of manipulation. I contribute myself, she said simply. My love, my support, my belief in who you are when you're not trying to be what someone else expects. Pretty words, Harvey said. But words don't pay rent. I stood there between them, between the life I'd known and the life I'd chosen, and felt the weight of every fear I'd carried about not being good enough, smart enough, worthy enough to be loved for myself. I need to think, I said finally. Cora stepped back like I'd slapped her. Think about what? About whether I love you or your bank account? Maybe. The word hung between us like broken glass. Harvey's smile was triumphant. Cora's face went carefully blank, the expression of someone protecting themselves from anticipated pain. Fine, she said quietly. Think all you want. But when you're done thinking, remember who was there when you needed someone to see past all the armor you wear. Remember who loved you when you were crying over divorce papers and questioning everything about yourself. She walked back into her apartment, closing the door with careful quietness that somehow hurt more than slamming would have. Smart choice, Harvey said. Now let's go home and fix this mess. But looking at his satisfied expression, I realized I'd already made the biggest mistake of my life. And I wasn't sure I could fix it. That night, alone in my apartment for the first time in months, I lay in bed remembering the way Cora had looked at me before she walked away. Like I'd confirmed every fear she'd never voiced about not being enough. Outside my window, Montgomery's streets were empty and dark, and I'd never felt more alone. The surgery went perfectly, according to the text message I received from Cora's neighbor, Mrs. Garcia 3 days after I'd watched Harvey's car disappear down the street. I stared at my phone for 20 minutes, typing and deleting responses that ranged from desperate apologies to casual congratulations before finally putting it away without sending anything. I'd made my choice. Or Harvey had made it for me. The distinction felt meaningless when I was sleeping alone in my king-size bed, surrounded by the expensive furniture and empty silence of a life that looked successful from the outside. You did the right thing, Harvey said over dinner at the country club, the same restaurant where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary. She was using you. Better to find out now before you wasted any more time. I nodded and pushed salmon around my plate, tasting nothing. Across the dining room, couples talked and laughed, sharing lives that seemed real in ways mine no longer did. Work became my refuge, the way it had after the divorce. I threw myself into a new project, redesigning the riverfront district with the kind of obsessive attention to detail that impressed my colleagues and worried my assistant. "Ruby, you've been here until midnight every night this week," she said, finding me at my desk at 9 p.m. "Maybe go home, watch some television, remember what relaxation feels like?" I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I was hollow, going through motions of a reconciliation that felt more like playing house than rebuilding a marriage. Harvey was attentive, bringing flowers and making dinner reservations, but everything felt scripted, performed for an audience that didn't exist. 3 weeks after the surgery, I drove past the community gardens on my way home from work. Not intentionally, at least not consciously, but Montgomery only had so many routes between downtown and my apartment. The fall vegetables were ready for harvest, and I could see people working in the early evening light, their movements careful and purposeful. Cora wasn't there, probably still recovering, but her presence lingered in every carefully tended bed, every thriving plant that bore witness to her vision of what communities could become when people cared enough to dig their hands into the dirt. My phone buzzed with a text from Harvey. "Dinner at 8? That new steakhouse on Commerce Street?" I turned left instead of right, driving toward the apartment I'd been avoiding for almost a month. Mrs. Garcia was watering plants on the front porch, her weathered face creasing into a disapproving frown when she saw my car. "She's not seeing visitors," she said before I could ask. "How is she? How do you think?" "Surgery went well, but hearts take longer to heal than backs." The accusation in her voice was deserved, but it still stung. "I made a mistake. Big mistake. That girl loved you like you were oxygen." Loved. Past tense? Mrs. Garcia's expression softened slightly. Present tense. Which makes it worse, doesn't it? Cora's apartment windows were dark, curtains drawn against the evening light. I sat in my car for 45 minutes, rehearsing apologies I didn't deserve to have accepted, before finally driving home to Harvey's pot roast and painful attempts at conversation about our future. The community center project brought us together again, inevitably. My office had been contracted to design the building, and the nonprofit board insisted on community input, which meant Cora Henderson, fully recovered and more passionate than ever about urban development that served actual residents. She walked into the conference room 6 months after I'd chosen Harvey over her, wearing a professional blazer that couldn't hide the confidence surgery success had given her. Her back was straight, her movements fluid, every gesture declaring victory over pain and limitations. "Miss Henderson," I said formally, as if we were strangers instead of former lovers. "Miss Edwards." Her voice was cool, professional, empty of the warmth I'd grown addicted to during our brief time together. The meeting was torture. 3 hours of discussing building plans and community needs while pretending we didn't know each other's bodies, each other's fears, each other's dreams. She was brilliant, as always, asking questions that forced me to consider details I'd missed, pushing for features that would serve the neighborhood's actual residents instead of just looking good in architectural magazines. "The childcare facility needs to be ground floor," she said, marking up my blueprints with efficient red ink. "Parents walking home from work can't deal with stairs and strollers." Good point. I made the note, hyper-aware of her proximity, the familiar scent of her shampoo, the way she still bit her lower lip when concentrating. After the meeting, she packed her materials efficiently while I lingered, desperate for any excuse to extend our interaction. "Cora." She looked up, her blue eyes guarded but not hostile. "Yes? You look good? Healthy?" "I feel good." Surgery was worth every penny I didn't have. The barb was subtle but unmistakable. Reference to money, to the financial dynamics Harvey had weaponized against us, delivered with surgeon-precise accuracy. "I'm glad." "Are you?" She shouldered her bag, moving toward the door. "Because you look terrible, Ruby. Like someone who made the safe choice and discovered it wasn't actually safe at all." Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me alone with blueprints and the devastating accuracy of her observation. That night, Harvey found me staring into our bedroom mirror, studying the stranger looking back. My face had the hollow look of someone going through motions, playing a role that fit badly no matter how much I adjusted the costume. "You've been distracted lately," he said, loosening his tie with the careful precision he brought to everything. "Is it work stress?" "Something like that. We should take a vacation. Bermuda, maybe. Get away from Montgomery, focus on us." "Harvey, Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you want me back? Really? He paused in the middle of removing his cufflinks. You're my wife. Ex-wife who spent 8 months with someone else. Ex-wife who discovered things about herself you clearly find disgusting. Why fight for that? Because marriage is work, Ruby. You don't just abandon it when things get difficult. But you did abandon it. With Sarah. That was different. How? He set down his cufflinks with the careful control that meant he was getting angry. Sarah was a mistake, a moment of weakness. What you did with that woman was deliberate, calculated to hurt me. What I did with Cora was fall in love. With a fantasy. With someone who represented everything I couldn't give you. Like what? Independence. Rebellion. The illusion that you didn't need security or stability or a real future. I stared at him. This man I'd married and divorced and somehow married again without ceremony or conscious choice, and realized he'd never seen me as anything more than an extension of himself. You've never asked what I need, I said quietly. In 8 years of marriage, you've never once asked what would make me happy. I gave you everything any reasonable woman would want. But not what I wanted. The next morning I drove to the community gardens before work, arriving as the sun painted Montgomery's skyline gold and pink. Cora was there, moving between raised beds with the careful grace of someone whose body worked properly again. She looked up when she heard my car door slam, her expression unreadable. The center design looks good, she said, pulling off gardening gloves. When do you break ground? Next month. I walked closer, breathing in the autumn air thick with the smell of composting leaves and winter preparations. Cora, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. We both knew what we were getting into. Did we? Because I don't think I knew anything. About myself, about what I wanted, about what love actually feels like when it's real. She leaned against the garden fence, arms crossed, waiting. Harvey was right about some things, I continued. I did pay for most of our dates. I did help with your surgery costs. But he was wrong about why that mattered. Was he? I helped because I wanted to. Because watching you struggle when I could fix it felt impossible. Not because you manipulated me or used me, but because loving someone means wanting to make their life easier when you can. And you figured this out how? By spending 6 months with someone who takes everything I give and never gives anything back. By remembering what it felt like to be with someone who saw me, really saw me, instead of just seeing a reflection of what they wanted. Cora's expression softened slightly. Ruby. I sold my wedding ring, I said, pulling the small velvet bag from my pocket. All my jewelry from the marriage, $23,000. Why? Because I want to invest in something real, in us. In this community center that you're going to help design properly. I held out the bag, my hand trembling slightly. I know I hurt you. I know I chose safety over love and nearly destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. But if you'll have me back, I want to do this right. She took the bag, weighing it in her palm like she was weighing possibilities. What about Harvey? What about him? Ruby, you can't keep bouncing between us every time you get scared. I'm not bouncing. I'm choosing. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what I want instead of what I think I should want. The morning light caught her blonde hair, turning it golden, and I remembered every reason I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Her passion, her integrity, her complete inability to be anything other than exactly who she was. I love you, I said simply. Not because you're convenient or safe or what I'm supposed to want. I love you because you make me want to be better than I am. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gray in her blue eyes, the small scar above her eyebrow, the curve of her mouth that had haunted my dreams for months. I love you too, she whispered. But Ruby, I need you to be sure. Really sure. Because I can't go through losing you again. Instead of answering with words, I kissed her. Right there in the community garden, surrounded by the evidence of what people could grow when they cared enough to tend it properly. She kissed me back with the desperation of someone who'd thought they'd lost something precious forever. I'm sure, I said against her lips. I'm choosing you. Choosing us. Choosing love that's real instead of comfortable. 6 months later, we stood in that same garden for the grand opening of the Montgomery Community Center, a building that perfectly balanced architectural beauty with practical functionality. Cora's input had made it something transformative, a place where neighborhood kids could get tutoring while their parents attended job training, where community gardens could flourish alongside small business incubators. "You did good work," she said, slipping her hand into mine as we watched families explore the new facility. We did good work. The crowd around us included Mrs. Garcia, who'd forgiven me with the grudging acceptance of someone who recognized genuine love when she saw it, and Mr. Thompson, who'd insisted on planting fruit trees around the building's perimeter. "Think it'll last?" Cora asked, watching children race through the playground we'd insisted on including despite budget constraints. "The building or us?" "Both." I squeezed her hand, thinking about the apartment we'd started sharing, the life we were building piece by careful piece, the way love felt when it was chosen instead of settled for. "Ask me in 50 years, I said, and kissed her again as Montgomery's afternoon light painted everything golden and possible.